Divine Rise, Grand Rising, blessed be to your day. May it be everything you require to create everything that you desire. This week in the God Hour podcast, we got into neutrality, the space of neutrality. And during one of the segments, we got into the aspects of understanding the difference between peace and neutrality. One of the biggest things, understanding this gate of neutrality, this space of neutrality, right above your courage and your pride in that frequency chart, is understanding that, and it made me really think, and I went back to a Bobby Hemmett lecture when he was like, you can do the same thing with Jesus that you do with Mickey Mouse. And it didn't catch me then. It didn't catch me. You can make Mickey Mouse your savior just like you made Jesus your savior. Do the same thing. So it made me really start thinking about transparency. And in this week's podcast, when we're talking about that realm of neutrality, that's the purgatory or the limbo. That's purgatory or limbo. That's the assessment space. So when we're coming into this neutrality, a lot of times we confuse neutrality with peace. Neutrality is the next level of allowing the conflict, which is natural. Remember, I've talked about this before. Conflict is the aspect of natural. The conflict is natural in the assessment process, so you can now gain into this transparency. So it made me think that a lot of times, I remember early on in my internal work, doing my internal work, when I was in that realm of neutrality, when I was in one of the first rounds of my neutrality, and it was looking out, but the only thing that you can look at, remember, because neutrality is the base of assessment. That means when you come to that point within your shadow work and you're coming into neutrality, it's the point right before you tap into the higher aspects of yourself. You can't pull anything from the higher into that space because everything above neutrality is potential. Everything beyond neutrality is potential. Simplest way to put that, beyond your comfort zone is your greatest potential. I remember always hearing that. I remember always hearing that. Beyond your comfort zone is all of your potential. Your comfort zone is that realm of neutrality. A lot of times when we're coming into these spaces, it made me think about the lotteries of addictions. The things that we have inside of our spaces that we want to make work based on the information that we now get. But remember, neutrality is the space of assessment. You can't bring anything from the higher into that space and it's not going to work because you need a level of transparency. You need a level of honesty and that vulnerability with yourself. So when I'm working with my clients and I'm talking about getting into that vulnerability aspect, getting into this honesty aspect, it's removing the martyr complex or the savior complex. That addiction, that whatever that addiction may be, that's a part of your martyr or your savior complex. So you can go through the process, because I went through the process, and be like, okay, cool, Jesus ain't real. Okay, cool. But because I didn't understand what was already implemented, the only reason I could go into that space anyways, because the true factors of what would teach me in the aspects of understanding myself, go. Rick and Morty said it. I said it in the podcast. Rick and Morty was like the body in the aspect of you are the body, just like with your zodiac sign, just like with everything that you pulling in there. Remember, it's for assessment. So I talked about it yesterday with your zodiac sign. I was an Aquarius. Notice I said was. Still am, but that's only one part of me. I was an Aquarius. One of the characteristics of an Aquarius, being detached, being disassociated. So guess what I would create? I created a world within this neutral zone that was based on detachment. So I carried detachment into that space. So I had to now when I go into the neutral zone, when we go into this neutral zone, we have to assess the aspects of what we take into this space, that identity. Your courage and your pride, remember your pride, that creates your identities. That courage and that pride, that courage gives the power or the voice to your identity. That pride creates that identity when you're inside of that space with yourself. So it's like if I ask, and when I ask people, I'm like, okay, cool. You are this, and this. You a manager over here. You this over here. You're this over here. What are you without any of the titles? They were like, I'd still be a black man or I'd still be a black woman. And I was like, all right, cool, let's go a little bit deeper. What would you be without the title of a black man or a black woman? What would you be? I'd be a king and a queen. Okay, what would you be without the title of a king or a queen? Man, I'd be a god or a god. What would you be without being a god or a goddess? Remember, you got to be honest with yourself, or every time you go into these spaces and take on these identities that are meant to work for you, these are your light bodies. These are your light bodies. And I talked about it in the podcast where when you go into the neutral zone, go watch the movie Turn it's on HBO Max. I want to say HBO Max, Prime Video, it might be everywhere. But it's talking about the state of inversion. When you go into the shadow world, when you're going into your shadow work, your light inverts with your shadow. That's why when you go into the shadow aspects, and we go into the example of you going into your hell loops and going into your hell zone, everything that you have to deal with is now seen. That's why it gets so heavy. That's where the emotional understanding of yourself comes into. Because everything that's in that space is now seen. Those identities that you carry are going to be what projects the light and allows the demons or the Damians or the unassessed and unhealed aspects of yourself to see you. You can see me? So think about every scary movie think about Amityville Horror, think about every scary ass movie when they finally come face to face with the damn ghost. That's in a similar aspect. The reason that you look at it, the reason that you eat it, remember, it's already imprinted inside of you naturally anyway. Everything's of you. Remember, you are the original point. So the reason that you feel some type of way when you look at a scary, like when I look at scary movies, I was always laughing. Some people look at scary movies, they're always getting scared. They don't want to watch scary movies. But in that space, what you're scared of is not what you're seeing. What you're scared of, what you're fearing, what you don't want to face, that's what you're fearing. When you look at when you get into these, when you're studying your mythos, remember, everything that you taking in is to be synthesized to understand you. That's the first step. And when you're doing it, it's all to synthesize to understand yourself. That's why you were attracted to it. That's why it came into that space. It's there to teach you transparency. See, without transparency in the neutral zone or purgatory, where all of those memories, all the stuff we haven't been dealing with, all of those repressed aspects, all that shit light up. And go watch Supernatural when Dean was in purgatory and the monsters and the Leviathans were coming in there. The Leviathan represents your original trauma. The Leviathan represents the original traumas, the original effects from all your past lives, and all of these aspects coming into your space. That's what the Leviathan represents. Your original sins or your original ignorances. Because remember, sin is the byproduct of ignorance. That means not knowing. Sin simply just means I don't have the knowledge of. Not standing on my square, not standing in my position. So the longer that I'm in this neutral zone, not doing the assessment, of course, this little block gets filled up. Because we're now trying to pull things like, ooh, I'm in peace. The neutral zone is not peace. Remember, conflict is natural. So when you're thinking that your peace is being challenged, that identity come up, ain't nobody gonna come at me that way, all of these aspects come to the surface, you're in the neutral zone. It's time to assess. I remember going through the whole process of assessing myself, arguments that I would be having, conversations that I would be having, and I was like wondering why, if it wasn't the same conversation, the same words, it was in the same framework. It always led to the same emotional aspect. It always led to the same outcome. because I was still searching for the outcome. I was not gaining that transparency. I wasn't gaining the true understanding. Transparency requires vulnerability and becoming open and honest with yourself. So that transparency for me is becoming open and honest with myself. And we can go look in the movie Baby Boy when she was telling Rodney everything about this nigga in jail. He was like, tell me I didn't live my mama. I want to hear all that shit. That's basically what you keep doing in that land of neutrality. Every time you come to the point when you start letting this stuff out and you start saying all of these things and you get right to that point where it's like, yeah, I got to do this. And then you start stepping back. When you start really hitting that point of that open honesty, and we can get to that point, we get to that point a few times. That's how some of this information will come into you. That's when that channel, that's when the download or that channel or that energy starts coming into your space for you, because it's helping, it's your higher self saying, okay, cool. They reach to a certain point. Here's the information. Start working with it. What we do, because we're so used to this addictive complex, what we do with some of the information is we use it to our benefit of our lower nature, the under parts of ourselves. We leave it down into the lower nature of ourselves. So it doesn't matter if you're sitting here, okay, cool, you studied the Tantra, if you do not understand your energy or that wound or the neglection wound that you haven't dealt with yet. It doesn't do you any good to go grab everything about your zodiac sign and then you're using it for a state of comfort, because in the neutral zone, the neutral zone is only based upon comfort, because it's based on shattering comforts, challenging your intuition, challenging your instincts, and now taking the assessment of your shadows, allowing the conflict to arise, allowing yourself to come into that space. Until you do that work, you will always have a lottery of addictions. That relationship that you want to work a certain way based on a predestination. That job, you want to work a certain way. That job wasn't meant to work the way you thought it was meant to work. One of the biggest things for me is understanding why my job was not supposed to work the way it was supposed to work. I was so hell-bent on my job being the end-all to be-all, my savior. I was going to sit there. I was going to be no hair. I'd probably be bald right now. No hair. Allowing my job to be the all, to try to fix everything. Predestination. And even when because this is the crazy part when you're stuck in that neutral zone. And you'll know you're stuck in that neutral zone. When things start to calm down, you're naturally a being of chaos. You fuel off chaos. Your soul is pure fire and chaos. So guess what you add to it? That's where you get stuck in those spaces where you're like, okay, cool, I got the job. I'm making some good money. I always said I needed to get a car. Now I'm going to get a car. So now you get a car, but you didn't do the process before getting the car. So you went down into your deeper aspects and let somebody convince you to get a car in somebody else's name, or so they can have it, so you ain't got to get a license. But now you're in comfort riding around with this license and you're wondering why a cop pulled you over. Nigga, you know you didn't have a license. You're sitting there in that space with yourself and you want to take a vacation or that escapecation, and you're wondering why your baby father has the kids, but you're mad because his girlfriend was helping take care of the kids. You set that up. You allowed that to come into that space. That's the conflict. It's challenging you to really look at yourself. It's time to stop moving in this sense of that duality with yourself. Stop. You don't realize, because as we talked about in the podcast, everything in your space is birthed based on your energy exchange with something else in that space. Everything that you're doing based on the patterns nurtures and keeps that going. Until you address the pattern You will always be stuck taking the same strides to try to keep everything the same. It's time to go deeper. It's time to go deeper inside of yourself. It's time to really do that work. That realm of neutrality. The realm of neutrality. That's your purgatory. That's where everything remains the exact fucking same. So if you got that comfort level of everything remaining the same and you thinking to yourself, why do I only go to the same 3 places, the same 4 places, no matter how many places you go to, but throughout your week you do the same thing every single day? I'm going to give you a nice little secret. You're living the same day over and over and over again. You're not creating. You're not tapped into the alchemy, so you're not creating anything. You're not creating anything of true value to puncture a hole in that, to gain that transparency. So now you just keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. Can't avoid that work. Shadow work is one of the most prized persistent parts. Shadow work, I'm going to give you some keys about, I'm going to give you a couple little pointers about shadow work. White supremacy, as y'all like to keep calling it, is in shadow work. It's Groundhog Day. Yeah. Shadow work, in your shadow work, white supremacy is inside of shadow work. Racism is inside of shadow work. The roots to racism are inside your shadows. The roots to the white supremacy or the oppressor is in your shadows. The roots to your money problems is inside of your shadows. It's called emotional literacy. It's called ownership. It's called owning your story. It's called looking inside of yourself and understanding these aspects inside of yourself. It's called not taking yourself into that martyr complex. A lot of us get stuck in that martyr complex. We use as I said it yesterday, we have this unconscious fetish of using our traumas as the lubrication for us to just slide by without doing the internal work. Because you get stuck in the physical as your fixer. All the physical shit you thinking about, yeah, you can get all the physical stuff. All the physical stuff is okay because you're supposed to indulge. But you're not supposed to get attached. And the way not to get attached is to understand the links or the body of light that you create to maintain that space. It's time to understand those spaces. That's what we taught. That's going to the God Hour podcast. New episode dropped, neutrality in reality. And we got into the nurturing and the birthing process, the strides to keep protecting certain aspects of ourselves, and in that shadow and light and understanding that inversion. I desire you to be the best. There were so many times for myself when I didn't understand just how important it was to be truly honest with myself. Not to a point of comfort, but to a point of discomfort. A lot of times we are honest with ourselves to a point of comfort. Remember, because we're still thinking that good and bad. It's time to take yourself into that honesty to a point of discomfort. It's time for you to take that accountability to a point of discomfort. It's time for you to take that avoidance wound, because that's where the wounds are at. The wounds are not inside of your comfort zone. The access to the wounds are not inside of your comfort zone. They're not inside of that neutral zone. That's going to take that transparency so you can go to the other side of yourself, of that spectrum, and now look back and see and start understanding. I can't see why my life's fucked up if all I'm doing is looking through the wound mat, the filter of the mask. I can't see my life as anything else but the wounds. It's time to heal. Everything from setting up a reading, setting up that consultation so we can get you situated, so we can start up those shadow work therapy sessions, give you that space that you need, give you that space, that environment so you can go ahead and book that up. There's no more excuses other than you doing your work. There's no more excuses other than, am I going to do my work or not do my work? Everything outside of you is you on a different pattern. The reason that you can see it and interact with it because you're on that same frequency. You want something to be different. You desire different. You gotta check your patterns and tap into your frequency. Everything that you see in your space that you interact with on a daily basis is because it's based on the same pattern and frequency that you are on. So when it triggers you, it's letting you know that there's something inside in your internal that you have to deal with. You've always been in the right position. Now it's time to assess, learn, tap in, become the fucking best. Become the authentic self. Start lifting yourself up. Start adjusting your standards. Start setting your standards and watch your boundaries fall into play. That external narrative, I'm going to set my boundaries. That's an external aspect that we get into. I'm going to set my boundaries, meaning when we think about boundaries, and this is an interesting thing I thought about boundaries. When we think about boundaries, we think about the things or the identities or the assets or the attributes that we gain. So we'll sit there in that space and like, when I get this job, when I get the house, when I get the car, when I get the kids straight, when I get this straight, when I get this straight, then I start working on myself. That's the boundary that you set. That's the boundary. Or the barrier, rather. That's the barrier. You're only creating barriers because you can get all these things, and I've talked about that before. You can get all of these things, but think about the frequency that you're on. If you get it based on fear is fast. The fear wave is fast, so you lose it as soon as you get it. The hatred, remember, there's two emotions, love and fear. Everything else is a byproduct of fear or a byproduct of love. Love is joy, peace. That's the higher aspect. In hatred, anger, sadness, all of those aspects, those are aspects of fear. So regardless if you have hatred, regardless if you mad at people, you're demonstrating fear. That's why as soon as somebody gives you something to make you unangry, or you go somewhere to go get your fix to no longer be angry, it tapers off. Two different frequencies. It's a fast frequency. That love in it, that love aspect, the best thing ever. Get out of your mind. I don't have the time. Time don't exist. Time only exists. Time is the illusion based upon your emotions and your behavior. Time don't exist. It only exists. Time exists based on your emotions and your behavior. Based on your emotions and your behavior. So if you find yourself procrastinating, that's a behavior. What emotions are leading to that behavior? That's how you get stuck in time. That's how you got stuck in the time loop. And then from there, you just created the environment to match what you were stuck in. It's time to get unfucking stuck with yourself. Right now, the website's being revamped. And website's being revamped, revamping a whole lot of things. But if you are interested within a reading, consultation, building on a building session, anything of that nature, natal charts, human design, anything of that nature, hit me up in the inbox. And since I'm going to post this to IG, post that over there into, hit me on Instagram at Papa_Lucy666. Or you can hit the new number, 910-240-3999. It's time to be the fucking best. It's time to stop giving yourself constant excuses to stay where you at. You have been your own competition. It's time to face yourself. I love you. We love us. Ashe.